Welcome to The Art of Medicine, the program that explores the arts, business, and clinical aspects of the practice of medicine. I'm Dr. Andrew Wilner, and my guests today are Vanessa and Dr. George Naum. Now, before we get started, if you are a physician looking for a new job or considering locum tenens for the first time, make sure to check out Comp Health. I've worked locums with Comp Health, and I appreciate the personalized experience I have with my recruiter, who is dedicated to my specialty and knows my needs and goals. Comp Health also offers full-time permanent jobs if you are looking for a longer-term switch. For more information, check out comphealth.com. Now, let me introduce my guest. Dr. George Naum is a family physician, and one of the reasons I have him on today is he has a new book with a very intriguing title, What's Forever For? And his wife, Vanessa, I didn't see your credits on the book, but I think you had a big role in it. And we're going to talk today about something I've never talked before on this program, which is how to have let's just go for it, how to have a perfect marriage. So Vanessa and George, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us on.
So appreciate you having us on. Like what you do, and we're happy to be a little part of it.
Well, thank you. And so tell me, how did you get into the marriage business?
Well, we met and we did marriage preparation, and we fell in love with that process. And we decided that we wanted to volunteer. So we spent 25 years in that volunteer space, working with couples, and it enriched our lives so much that we knew that this was something we eventually wanted to do full time. So now we've been doing it.
So trial by fire, I mean, I don't think there's a college degree, right, in marriage coaching, right?
Coaching, correct.
So, and I think, I've talked with John Jerica, many times about how do you get into a non-clinical career, and it's always, volunteer, just go do it,
right.
And then, maybe it'll evolve into something. And so it's nice to hear that. I think 25 years is a good track record. and you've been married longer than that, right? So that gives you a little credibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've been married. It'll be 30 years in November. As far as my background, I was raised in a physician marriage. My grandfather was a physician. I was around physicians my entire life. A lot of my desire to eventually get into this was, I was raised in a very dysfunctional marriage for a number of years. And my attitude was, yes, I want to be a doctor. It's what I have always wanted to be. And I also want to be married, and the two don't need to be mutually exclusive. However, with my dad and my mom, my dad was a physician, it was mutually exclusive. And I'm going to make sure that this doesn't have to be that way. So that's kind of an inspiration for me with this.
So what special challenges do physician marriages have?
Yeah, I mean, it's the question is where to start, but yeah. I will tell you, and this is what we do with a lot of our coaching, is we use ourselves as examples. I initially in practice, and really several years after that, had a big issue disconnecting from the office and reconnecting at home. And now what we see with our clients, it's even worse, because of the state of medicine that we're in, COVID, third party, you name it. It's just caused so much stress.
Well,
amongst our colleagues.
The computer, I mean, being able, it's wonderful. I was, on the computer last night, checking on my patients. But how do you disconnect when, all you have to do is press a button and there they are?
Yeah,
And
it's
that's go ahead.
yeah, it's very, very challenging. And the work that we do is we work with somatics and breathing and getting people in touch with their body and being a little bit more aware of that and then intentional with it. So docs don't realize how much time they spend in their heads until I go through a practice and say, okay, let's bring this body part on board and try to make that distinction. And we hear that they love that. They love to do that because it's a stress reducer. It's a stress reliever to just take a break out of your head and then drop down into your body and really pay attention to what it's trying to tell you.
So just to wrap up what I was saying about my issue was, I would get home, however many kids that we had at the time, either one or three, which is what we ended up having. I'd walk through the door. I'm numb, basically. I just want to decompress. Meanwhile, Vanessa, who was also running the office as well as being primary caretaker for our kids, she's home, she's cooking, she's got kids pawing on her.
And I need him to walk through the door and help me out.
And I go to my chair, and all I'm interested in is looking at the TV. And I'm oblivious to everything that's going on there because I just like, give me a half hour, an hour, hour and a half, and let me just, cool my brain down from the fried part that it is at right now. And so what happens is all this is on her until I'm done. And so she put up with that for a while, as I know a lot of wives or husbands do that we've seen out there. And but after a while, it gets old.
And what happens is resentment builds. And when resentment builds, disconnection happens. And disconnection is insidious. It's the opposite of being intentional in your relationship. So because of that, it's how, 20-year marrieds wake up one day and decide to divorce because, the insidiousness of that disconnection, was cumulative over their marriage, and they were never intentional with growing together. And instead, they grew apart.
Disillusionment, disenchantment, a lot of disses in there that happen. When you,
like that.
when you, when you, like Vanessa says, as physicians, we have to be in our heads because we're thinking about diagnosis. We're thinking about a lot of things. It's not here, it's up here, figuring things out. And so when you're trying to turn that off, when you walk through that door, that's really not easy to do. And it's,
well, let me ask you, George. I mean, is it reasonable for your wife to expect you? I mean, you got up early, you had an incredibly stressful day, you missed lunch, you're in traffic, you get home. I mean, is it reasonable for her to expect you? Oh, George, great, you're home. Now you can change the diaper and the sink is leaking, and nobody took the garbage back in. I mean, is that a reasonable expectation from your point of view?
I would say, and this was an issue years ago, Doc, that, that it was a problem that drove my parents apart. And it was that kind of thing. It was, for me to be that way, it is basically discounting the contribution that she brings to the relationship. It's like me saying, okay, well, I'm the primary breadwinner. I go to the office. I deal with problems with patients. I deal with third-party payers. I deal with administration. I deal with staff, especially when they're fighting with each other. I deal with all that stuff. And so I should get a pass when I come home and not have to do anything. But what that is me just saying, I'm the one who counts. What you do doesn't mean squat. So Is it easy to fall into that trap? Absolutely. But how you get over that is to communicate about it, which Vanessa did to me, to say, hey, when we decided we were going to have kids and I was going to be a part of the practice, this was going to be a team approach. And there's no team, it's just you. And I have to say, it was I, like they say, no I in team. Wow. So it was all about I. And so I had to get my proverbial head out of my rear end and listen to what she was saying to me. And that's one of the ways that you get through this, is that you hear about the disenchantment or the disillusionment and you listen and then you work through it. You just can't assume or always be empathetic. You can only be empathetic. Your empathometer hits tilt, after a while, because it's like, okay, I'm empathic, but when am I going to be thought about?
Now, there are other professions where people work hard, but do you think physicians are at particular risk for this because they tend to be, well, of course, not all, but many, and I'll include myself in this, as a type A perfectionist. I want to be the best at what I do. And that doesn't happen 8 to 5. You're not going to be the best at what you do. And a perfectionist, if you work 8 to 5, the hours get a lot longer, and you have to prioritize your professional and personal goals. And, something gives, and that may be what happens at home. So where do you find that extra energy to switch gears, turn off work? Okay, I'm home, honey, and sort of, and contribute.
Good.
What's important to you? That's my question. What is really important to you? Is it important that you stay connected to work in whatever times you want to be, and then risk the deconnection from your spouse or the disconnection from your spouse? So what do you really want? And don't forget, like he said, team.
So be intentional. So if you are going to disconnect, at least do it on purpose.
Yeah.
But how I would do it is, I would call, as I'm getting ready to walk out the door, assuming I didn't have rounds to make, or assuming that I wasn't going somewhere else, I would say, okay, I'm coming home. Mm-hmm. And so I would, I knew that my brain was still fried. I was still going to need that disconnection when I got, or that decompression when I got home, but I at least started the process and say, honey, I'm coming home. And so that is where it has to start. You make an intentional decision to call and say, okay, I'm calling you to tell you I'm coming home. And that is the initiation of the process.
And you can,
well, that's great to hear, because I always do that. I'm in the car.
Good job.
In the car.
Good job.
30 minutes of traffic, more or less. But if she's interested, I'm on my way.
There you go.
Yes. So, because, my day is completely unpredictable. Might leave early, might more often leave late. Now, a lot of times, I would say it is not uncommon in our culture for someone to come home and, as part of this decompression and relaxation, might have a drink or a beer. Mm-hmm. Or some people I've heard even smoke marijuana. It's like, well, it relaxes me. So I guess 2 questions. 1, is that reasonable? And 2, does that lead to substance dependence, or it's just part of our culture and it's an okay thing? What do you think about that?
Well, I'll let Vanessa speak to that, because she was in a marriage that there was a lot of addiction. So,
and I'm not an authority on addiction, of course. However, I did live with someone that was addicted to alcohol. And as I was saying before, when it comes to substance abuse, you can communicate with your spouse and try to understand that and empathize with them. But the question is, are they willing to get help? Do they recognize that it's a problem? And are they willing to get help? And if they're, not recognizing it as a problem and they're not wanting to get help, then I was faced with a decision. I could lead that horse to water, but I couldn't make him drink. And if he wasn't willing to drink for himself, there was no way in hell he was going to do it for me. And so then I needed to make a decision. What did I want from a relationship? And I certainly did not want, to be living that type of lifestyle.
Why did the drinking, I mean, this may be obvious, but why did the drinking impair the relationship?
Wow. That's simple, because he would start drinking at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and not walk through the doors until 10 o'clock at night, and then just be totally inebriated.
Okay, so he wasn't drinking with you.
Correct.
In fact, I do know I had some very good friends. It was a couple, and they used to drink together. In fact, they actually bought a house near the bar so they wouldn't have to drive home, because that was such a big part. I remember they told me that. We found this great house, and it's right next to the bar, so we don't have to worry about driving. Well, it's got to be 15 years or 20 into their marriage. One of them decided that she didn't want to drink anymore. I just had some epiphany. This isn't the way I want to spend the rest of my life. And they broke up because the other one did not feel that way. And they were both employed. I mean, they were what you call functioning alcoholics, I guess.
Right.
And but that change in lifestyle actually resulted in a divorce, because now sort of, I think the negatives were more apparent because they weren't sharing them.
They had nothing in common except drinking together.
And that's an issue.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit in judgment about any of our colleagues who smoke marijuana or who drink. I understand that. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I haven't had a drink now and then when I've been stressed, but I think to continue to rely on that, rather than speak to what's really going on with you and why you feel like you need this to, as part of your decompression, I think that has to be, that has to be discussed. We often, it comes up, not exactly the way you phrased the question, but similar to it. And, we tell them to do what we do, which is to take a walk, come home after the kids are ready, walk with the kids. If there's no kids, the two of you walk. If you live in a temperate climate, go to an area where you can walk. And in walking and getting your heart rate up and talking while you're walking, it tends to help with that decompression, along with TV. I just think it's a rabbit hole that you can go down very quickly if you're using substances to deal with your stress.
Well, let me ask another question about relationships. A lot of people, well, I have heard that marrying young, which is something I didn't do, but if you do marry young, that sometimes people grow apart. They meet in high school or college and they get married right after that. And then there's medical school residency, starting a new practice, and maybe the wife is at home just raising the children, or vice versa, or they just become different people, they say. So is number one, does that really happen? And number two, what do you do about it? How do you prevent it from destroying the marriage?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens. But there are also lots of folks out there that have married young and have very healthy, normal relationships into their golden years, right? I think the important thing is how are you growing? If you're growing apart, then obviously, that's the problem. So grow together and do things that, what did you do when you were dating that you loved to do? What was the reason that you married this person? What type of fun things did you do that you really, really enjoyed? Like Jeep and I have always been able to talk about things and just, I one of the things that really turns me on about him is his intelligence and about so many topics, any topic you can imagine, even politics. And so, if we're in the car together, I'll say, well, what do you think about this, or what's going on with that? And just talking. And that's something that really keeps us together. Now, that might not work for everyone, but we're here to help you find out what practices you can do to keep your connection together, despite whether or not you have dual careers, or like in your instance, your wife was a stay-at-home mom, and then you had the practice of medicine. So really, what was it that got you together? And let's not forget that. And let's be intentional about continuing that.
And I'll just add a little bit to that, and I agree with everything that Vanessa said. But
that I understand is that is the magic to a successful marriage. And there's this joke: this couple's been married 50 years. And so other couples ask him, how have you managed to have such a happy, wonderful relationship? And the husband says, well, I make all the major decisions and my wife makes all the minor decisions. And it works out fine. So
if they're okay with that, right?
That sounds like a great system. And then the follow-up question is, well, could you give me an example of one of the major decisions, that you would make that your wife wouldn't? And he says, now that I think about it, there haven't been any.
Ooh. But what I would say is, with youth, and not saying that success can't happen, but there really needs to be a lot of premarital preparation. I mean, in talking about substantial things instead of well, I like to do this, I like to do that. But things like, well, are we going to have kids? And if we're going to have kids, how many kids are we going to have? And if, your spouse is a physician, or you're both physicians, where are you going to live? Where are you going to do your training? Is that going to cause a problem? Because, well, I like where I'm living right now. My family's here. I have a lot of friends here, and I really, it's a deal breaker for me to have to move to another area. So these are there in-law issues that need to be reconciled. And that's the problem, is these things are not talked about in depth. Why? Because they cause uncomfort with between us. So we just kind of blow it off and say, after we get married, it's going to be okay.
It'll work itself out.
I'm telling you, once the attraction wears off and the physical, we're in such love. Once that wears off and real life hits you in the face, this problem comes back, and because you've not prepared for it enough, then it's an even bigger problem because you've got rings on.
All right. Well, we're almost out of time. And before we close, I have two questions. One, what is the first thing a couple should do when they realize that things are rocky? Yeah, let's deal that, and then I'll ask my last question.
Ask for help. Right?
Ask for help. Okay.
Ask for help. Have a discussion with someone. And because things are rocky doesn't necessarily mean that there is a problem there. You just might need support in the form of being able to discuss it openly with someone. And don't wait, because it's not going to go away, right? That's an insidious thing that I was talking about. That's going to just eat away at the relationship and the connection of that relationship on a daily basis.
All right. And my last question is your book. What am I going to learn from your book? There we go. And where
there's a shameless plug right there.
That's right. Well, one of the reasons we're here, I think if you make that effort to write a book, at least one person ought to read it. And they're not going to read it if they don't know it's out there. So where can I find it?
It's on our website, which is www.bestfriendsagain.com, and that's the name of our business, Best Friends Again. And it's because, for one, when you get married, you should be each other's best friends. But unfortunately, that becomes an issue sometimes, and we get away from that. So we get you back to that. So it's available on the website. If you go to the website, you don't want to buy the whole book. There's a way you can get a chapter called The Love Huddle, which is a way of communication that we coach about. Mm-hmm. So it's available there. It's available on Amazon. It's an award-winning book on Amazon and a Nonfiction Authors Association as well. And so it was a labor of love to write it. With our coaching practice, we refer to it a lot, as well as the program that we take couples through. So I'm very proud of it. It's written so no matter what your socioeconomic background or your education, it's easily written. And I wrote it as if I was talking to a patient and being so they understand it. And people who have read it have told me that yes, it's very easy to read, and they've been able to take several keys from it.
And think of it as enrichment. So coaching is enrichment. It's learning new things, things that you've never thought of before. So it's really about taking that step in the learning process and just enriching your life, injecting something new and different and fun into it, and then discovering the joy between the two of you, going through something new together.
Right. It's not like going to the principal's office because you did something wrong.
No,
not at all.
No. Our program is educational, lots of education.
Well, that's great. Well, Vanessa and George, I want to thank you for these words of wisdom. I'm sure they'll be very helpful to many of our listeners. And thanks for being on The Art of Medicine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilner. Really appreciate it a lot, and it's been a pleasure of ours to spend time with you.
Absolutely.
Well, wasn't that fun? I can't wait to try some of these techniques and see if they really work. Thanks again, George and Vanessa. Now, before we close, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Comp Health. At Comp Health, you can talk with a recruiter who knows your specialty and will actually get to know you and your goals. Consider starting your personalized job search at Comp Health. That's comphealth.com.
This program is hosted, edited, and produced by Andrew Wilner, MD, FACP, FAAN. Guests receive no financial compensation for their appearance on The Art of Medicine. Andrew Wilner, MD, is Associate Professor of Neurology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, Memphis, Tennessee. Views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this program belong solely to Dr. Wilner and his guests, and not necessarily to their employers, organizations, or other group or individual. While this program intends to be informative, it is meant for entertainment purposes only. The Art of Medicine does not offer professional financial, legal, or medical advice. Dr. Wilner and his guests assume no responsibility or liability for any damages, financial or otherwise, that arise in connection with consuming this program's content. Thanks for watching. For more episodes of The Art of Medicine, please subscribe. www.andrewwilner.com